The footy season is almost upon us, so you know what that means. It's time for season predictions. And we'll start from the bottom with a wooden spoon. I'm sure we all know it's probably going to the Tigers. Yes, that's right. My Richmond Tigers, I am prepared for a very mediocre season from the team they call Richmond. And I think it is because, obviously, they have so many young players in there. I think last year, they won 2 games last year. They beat Sydney, they beat Adelaide. They weren't the worst team of all time, but they just had no consistency in the team throughout the year. I think this year, with the injection of a lot of youth, they will probably be a little bit more competitive in games. They'll get blown out in a lot of games as well. But the Tigers will be finishing at the bottom of the ladder, unfortunately. But hopefully they can get 3 to 4 wins would be a decentish result. In fact, any more than that, I'll be a happy man. Speaking of the teams at the bottom, we're going to talk about who might slide down the ladder from where they finished last year. And I've picked 3 teams for this one as to who could be going down a little bit from where they were. And the first one is the Western Bulldogs. I think they've obviously had a horror pre-season, so many injuries, including the captain Marcus Bontempelli out for the first month of the year. I think a lot of their injuries that have happened are best 22 sort of players, and they're missing probably about a third of their best side in there. And that's very difficult to be competitive when you are missing so much of your top-end talents. I think the Dogs are going to be one of the teams that slide. I also think Port Adelaide, it's Hinkley's last year. Is that going to have an impact on them? Will there sort of be, 2-man power struggle at the top between Hinkley and Carr as to who is actually running the show? We saw that a few years ago with Clarkson and Sam Mitchell, with Clarko exiting earlier in the season than originally anticipated. And I think Port Adelaide in general, they've sort of been that team that's been pretty good during home and away, but have struggled during the finals. And this year especially, I think their forward line is going to be a bit more of a struggle than it has in previous years. So hopefully Port Adelaide can do something, but I think they're going to be slipping down the ladder. And I also think the Blues. I think the Blues will be another side that will slide just a little bit down the ladder. They finished 8th last year, just percentage ahead of Collingwood. Will they be able to replicate that sort of a year that they had last year? I don't know. Obviously, again, missing a few players. Curnow out for a little bit of time. But they looked okay in the preseason games. Vossi, I think, has got the team up and running. But I think they might just take a little bit of a slip and possibly miss the finals this year. As for the teams that are going to rise from the bottom to the top, I think there is one very obvious choice that just about everyone has predicted, and that is the Fremantle Dockers. The Dockers have obviously had a very good preseason. Again, also missing the finals by, I think it was half a game last year. They missed their opportunity against Port Adelaide in the last round of the season to play finals football. Now they got Shea Bolton in there. They have a relatively good looking forward mix as well that look dangerous at times. Their defense is really solid, and their midfield, one of the best in the comp. So I think obviously having a guy like Bolton come in, create those opportunities for Fremantle is really going to put them in a good spot, right? They're probably the team that goes from outside the top 8 into the top 4, you would think. Should they be competitive enough? It is interesting though, obviously the last few years their game style has sort of been a bit lackluster. Can they be a bit more explosive on turnover and be a bit more entertaining to watch? I'd love for that to happen, please, Fremantle. If you're going to win games of football, please at least make them entertaining. The next 2 teams, I think I sort of maybe had them to rise last year, but they didn't do that. Adelaide Crows and the Gold Coast Suns. Now I'm bundling the 2 of them together because first of all, the Gold Coast Suns, they just have to go from nothing to something this year. Because if they don't do it this year, when will they eventually rise? They've had a number of years of academy players and talent coming through into their team. Leo Lombard is another player who's come in this year. The draft picks don't really matter for the Gold Coast like they do any other club, and that's why they trade so many of them out. Because they just need the points to get their players in. Anderson and Rao leading the front in the midfield. They've got the 3 heads in the forward line of King, Walter, and Ethan Reid in there as well. And now you've got the half-back line with some real serious pace in there with Rioli and John Noble coming into that team. So I think Gold Coast are primed to actually make the rise up the ladder this year and finally play finals football. And if they don't, gee, they're in all sorts, aren't they? As for the Crows, who I just touched on, I don't know whether or not they're going to play finals this year. Obviously, last year they were bottom 4. I think they're going to rise a little bit. I think similarly with North, but I don't know about North. But Adelaide, I think, definitely should rise up. I've been impressed with their preseason games in terms of how they played and the pressure they were applying. How much do we read into those is always questionable as well, but I think that Thilthorpe is going to be one of those players that will really help elevate them to the next level and take the mantle of the number 1 key forward with Tex Walker in that side. As we work our way towards who the premiers could be, let's talk about medals. Who are going to win the medals? And we'll talk about who might be the rising star here in the AFL this season. And I'm going for an explosive small forward from the Essendon Footy Club, Isaac Kako. I think the bookmakers have Nate Caddy, his mate, as one of the favourites to win the rising star, but I think Kako is probably the best small forward Essendon has had in a supremely long time. He's got elite talent, he's fantastic at ground level, and he just has that great goal sense that you think, okay, he's going to make an impact almost every game. If he kicks 40 goals this year, almost a lock for a position as the rising star. I think a 30 plus is a great result for Essendon if he can do that, but I think he's going to be much more of a goal sneak than we think. Very exciting player. I hope he does win the rising star. Obviously, you've got a number of other players at the Tigers. They've got a lot of young talent there. Lawler, obviously, the number 1 pick. Josh Smillie, also another top 10 pick the Tigers have. The St Kilda have a couple of good players. Melbourne have a couple of good players. But I'm going with Kako because I love the small forwards and I love their work. Speaking of goals, who is going to win the Coleman medal? I've got a list here. Let me go through them. Jeremy Cameron, Riley Thilthorpe, Sam Darcy, Ben King, Harry Mackay, Jesse Hogan, and Oscar Allen. They're my big talls that I think are going to be around the mark this year. But if I have to pick one of them, I'm actually going to go... I don't really know who I was going to pick. I was going to pick Oscar Allen, but then I was like, no, well, West Coast are actually going to be not very good this year, are they? I'm going to go with Jeremy Cameron. I think, obviously, Geelong, they have a bigger spread of goal kickers now with Shannon Neal and Ollie Henry and Ryan Myers and these types of players that Cameron maybe doesn't quite get the mix that he needs to. But if Geelong are to be another, prelim final sort of a team or a top 4 team, Cameron is going to kick a lot of goals. I hope he does win the Coleman again this year because he's one of my favourite players to watch. So Jeremy Cameron is my pick for the Coleman medal. Next up in the medals sort of tally, we've got the Brownlow medal, and I think if you're an idiot, you're picking anyone other than Nick Dacos because of reasons. The reason I say that is you look at how Patrick Cripps won the Brownlow last year, most votes ever. Dacos got the second most votes ever. The umpires are looking for these players to give votes to. Bearing an injury that takes him out for a significant portion of the year, Nick Dacos will win the Brownlow medal purely by stepping out onto the field. If he gets 25 and a goal, he's getting 3 votes more often than not, even probably in a losing side. The umpires have proven over the last couple of years that they cannot be trusted to actually judge a game based on what has happened in the game, and they are picking votes mostly on reputation. That's not to say Cripps didn't have a great year last year, but did he have the best season of all time? Probably not. So anyway, I'm picking Nick Dacos. If anyone else wins, I will be shocked, and everyone else will probably also be shocked. And now for the big one, the premiers. Who is going to win the flag this year? And I honestly could not tell you who it's going to be. You look at the top 4 last year, Brisbane was not even in that. They were the best side in it, and I don't even think they were playing their best football, really, until the grand final. If they continue on an upward trajectory this year, they're going to be even harder to beat, especially come the big games. And you look at the 2 games prior to the grand final where they scraped through by a goal or just under a goal. They were gone in both of those games and came from nowhere to actually win them in the final few moments. So their big players stand up in the big moments. That's something you can't teach. And if they come up against a side who is up and coming, whether it be Hawthorn or Fremantle or whoever else that sort of threatens them, Brisbane are going to be a very difficult team to beat again this year. So if not Brisbane, who could possibly beat them? You've got Geelong, who got very close in the prelim final last year. The Giants, who also got close, but probably not the Giants, and probably not Geelong. Or maybe Geelong is a team that could beat them. Sydney, I don't think they're any better this year. They, I think, will struggle to be at the top like they were last year. Fremantle is a side with youth and innovation, but if you haven't played finals for a few years, can you win a grand final? Or Collingwood, are they the team who knocked off Brisbane a few years ago? Can they rise back to their tippy-top ways and become a premiership threat? Or is it someone else who I haven't mentioned, like Carlton or Essendon? Or nah, let's not get carried away with these teams. There's probably really only a handful of sides that can beat Brisbane. And given Brisbane were the best team last year, and I think they're going to get better, despite no Joe Danaher, I think you'd be hard-pressed to pick anyone other than Brisbane again. So, I'm going the Lions for the premiership. I've probably gone some real boring predictions this year, actually. Let's be honest. I've gone for Nick Dacos to win the Brownlow, Richmond to win the Wooden Spoon, Fremantle to rise, and Brisbane to win the flag. That's honestly one of the most boring predictions from me of all time. Apologies for that. So, bonus round, one more rogue prediction for the year. This will be the year Essendon wins a final. I just got to go out on a limb on something. I don't think it's going to happen, but Essendon will win a final this year, everyone. That's it. That's all. Prediction's done. It'll happen. Maybe, maybe, maybe not. You never know. Goodbye.